Hello, friends. It's been a hot minute since we've recorded and put a new episode out, basically because I've just been, busy with life, pandemic, the whole thing. But here we are. I'm amped to be back. Michael, thank you for being here and being my co-host today.
Yeah,
And
happy to be here.
awesome. And okay, so Lisa Wise, uh, let me just start by saying, publicly proclaiming really my regard and fondness for you. Um, I mean, I'm going to sound like a total fangirl probably throughout this whole episode, but really, I have to say, generally in life, and specifically in DC, it's a town that's focused on like success and money, and I'm in a very money driven industry, real estate. So I'm really, really drawn to people who are, I don't know, good people who do good things. And so I'm just a really big fan of everything that I've heard about you, but specifically about birdSEED, which is what we're going to talk about today. So thank you so much for being on my podcast.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, we had you on before. We had you on the previous iteration of this podcast where we talked about kind of your first focus, your first business, which was, property management in the DC area. Um, but now we're talking about something which is completely different, but is still kind of associated. So why don't you just tell people who are listening who maybe are not familiar with, Flock or Roost or any of those, and then kind of, get us into what birdSEED is and just kind of give everyone an overview.
Sure. I'm the founder and chief flockster of Flock DC, and we're a family of real estate management companies. We've been doing this kind of work for about 12 years. Our inaugural brand is Nest DC, and we started with one little property at a time in the district proper. The idea was we wanted people to have great living experiences and great places to call home. And we feel like when people are having a great living experience, they make better neighbors lead to better neighborhoods lead to stronger, more robust and sustainable communities. And so I have a background in nonprofit management, and I always make the joke, you can take the girl out of the nonprofit, but you can't take the nonprofit out of the girl. And so I've always been really interested in and invested in being part of things that are values focused, mission centric, purpose driven. And so we went about, creating a group of real estate companies that focused on people having a great experience, focus on making a difference, and focusing on being impactful in our community. And this, we have been humming along in that regard, and I think we've done a really good job of having what we might call a wing print in the community, from a microgrant program to tons of community work to many of our team members sitting and serving on boards of directors and sometimes in very key roles, and committing a lot of time, visibility, and partnership to different organizations that we know make a significant difference in the city. But the pandemic gave us an invitation to really rethink what our role is in the real estate world, and setting an example for making a real meaningful difference and making a stand on something that we cared most about. And the murder of George Floyd, the civil unrest, the increasing scrutiny over the lack of equity, the lack of intergenerational wealth building for people who are Black and Brown, was something that we felt obligated and really motivated to address as a company. And so birdSEED, which had been part of our family of birds for a while, has been our philanthropic arm. And it's really an avenue for us to be able to give back to people in the community, either financially or through the investment of our time and resources. We decided to elevate birdSEED and give it kind of a whole new wrapper, or a new set of wings, if you will, and and have it focus on, because you can't stop with the bird themes; it just never ends.
For the record, I'm one who loves like puns and like themed things, and so I mean that you won me with that alone. But anyway, sorry, continue.
I mean,
Your
it's just,
birds that flock together.
yeah, oh, it just never ends. Flying in formation. I mean, like a bird of a feather. What did I say? When we promoted somebody one year, and I wrote a newsletter about it, I said, "She's the wind beneath my wings," and I was like, "I have to." Like, you have to do it. Like, this is the cheesiest thing I've ever written, and yet it's absolutely perfect. So we gave birdSEED some new wings and said, listen, how do we tease out this program and really hone in on housing justice? Because that's the space that we work in. It's what we call our specialty. But if we're not addressing race and inequity and the history that the real estate industry has in that space, and what we've done as people in the real estate industry to advance injustice, not justice, but to advance injustice and inequity. It's the time for people to be paying a lot more attention to that history and say, I may not be responsible for the past injustices, but I can certainly do a lot more about creating a just and equitable future. So we decided to do that. So we kind of scraped together resources, many of which came from my savings, and my wife may or may not be alarmed by that decision. But we decided to create a fund of $215,000 and make down payment grants to Black and Brown applicants in the amount of $5,000 to $15,000. So it's a very simple application process, and to be eligible, you really just need to be first time home buyer, buy in the region, be from this area 3+ years, and then a handful of other criteria. And it's really a no strings attached grant. There are housing assistance programs that will help with down payments, but those are loans and forgivable over time. This is strictly a grant. And so that's kind of what we're focused on right now. And I'm happy to answer more questions about it.
Well, so,
Yeah.
I am just wondering, so I was part of a DC Open Door seminar a couple of months before the pandemic hit. Um and I know that there are programs like that have existed for a bit, that help with down payment assistance and things. And so you kind of started to touch on it about how your program differs. And I obviously don't want to talk negatively about any assistance program because inherently they're doing great, but I mean, they are pain points, right?
Correct.
So what are you guys doing that's different? And or I know birdSEED's like super new, and so perhaps you're going to have to work out some of your own hiccups, but what have you learned or heard from that you think you're going to navigate a little bit better or differently?
I think the key differentiator is the assistance versus grant. So assistance implies a relationship with the applicant over a period of time where that loan is forgivable. It is generally given as a loan and not a cash grant award. Our program is the opposite. So what we want to do is, we'll release funds at closing when the applicant has identified the home. And that's pretty much it. We ask that they check in with us once or twice to just see how they're doing. But other than that, we trust that they need the funds. We trust that they'll buy a home with them. And that's kind of it. We're not checking credit scores. We're not asking people to go through financial planning programs or take courses. We actually trust that if they're articulating that they need cash in a down payment grant, then that's the case. We make that grant, and then they can accelerate the home buying process. We're not asking for people to jump through hoops. We're intentionally streamlining the process and making it as sort of accessible as possible. And that is not very common. So it's really a direct cash assistance program, which would be not far from sort of similar concepts to like universal basic income. It's trusting people with cash resources because they know what decisions they need to make. And I think that there's merit in both strategies. But selfishly, I have to also understand, like, we manage, over $1 billion in real estate. And this is an entirely volunteer driven effort. If I'm giving loans and tracking progress and sort of handling educational programs and all these metrics and accountability efforts, like, I can't actually do that. So it's not viable for us to deliver on a program like that one. And I don't think it's necessarily needed for a lot of the applicants that will seek funding from us.
I think one thing that we've talked about before on this podcast is that the biggest hurdle that most people have to home ownership is that down payment and is that cash. And as you know, from a property management perspective, they may be perfectly fine with that monthly payment. They can make that payment just fine. It's that first cash outlay that really kind of is that barrier. And there's so many people who are like, well, I can actually afford more of a house than I rent now if I can buy it, but I can't put that $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 down at the onset, even for the lowest amount. And then we've doubled that with the hurdles that we talked about with the other programs, where you put in an offer and you say, okay, I'm going to use this great city program, and a seller in a competitive market will look at that and go, they may run out of money, they may be a delay, there may be 40, there's just a lot of things that a seller looks at and goes, and it adds kind of almost like insult to injury. It's like they're trying to get to that next step in life and they're trying to get that American dream. And we almost, it's that first step that they're struggling with, and they could do everything else, but it's that first step.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's really kind of important about this, is that it is literally just a grant. It's not, no strings attached. It's just a grant. So
Yep.
Yeah, and Michael, you're talking about something. I mean, Lisa, you guys discussed not just this program with birdSEED, but advocacy in general for an industry that's, people would like to think it's not broken anymore,
Yeah.
right? But it's like, well, it's the result. We're where we are right now after long time of things not being okay, right? And there's some residual stuff left over from when things were not equitable at all.
There's
And
there's still so much disparity. I mean, if you look at home ownership rates between people who are black and brown and people who are white, the math is really simple. People of color are not able to buy homes at the same rate that white people are. And if you don't create intergenerational wealth, then you're basically missing the boat in terms of providing for your family and future generations. And that disempowers entire demographics. It's just really heartbreaking to see that. And it was by design.
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is we're not going to undo all of the wrongs ever, probably in our lifetime, unfortunately. I mean, that'd be great if we could, but the fact is you got to start somewhere, right? But what Michael was saying about how when you look at offers as an agent who's getting offers, that's something else, like, not to get off topic, but something else that has to be worked on is agents properly, putting things on, trying to make things on an even plate for everybody. Like, there's other kinds of loans that agents will talk differently about, like a VA loan, for example, a VA loan, which is for people who've been in the military and they get some really great benefits for the VA loan. You don't have to put any money down, et cetera, et cetera. And some people will poo-poo the fact that it's 0% down. It's tricky, right? It's really tricky because you first of all, like, not everything's the same, right? You're weighing like a million different factors when this is happening. But you're trying to do it in a way that makes it as fair and equitable as possible. It's just, we've got a lot of things to fix, but I'm glad that you guys are at least providing help in one of those arenas, and we're just going to have to slowly start to work on some of the others.
I think agents can work together to help sellers understand that a loan converts to cash in their pocket at the end of the transaction regardless. So the source of the income is not really their concern. It shouldn't be. All cash offers may look appealing on paper, but it doesn't necessarily make for a better buyer. It just means that buyer has an all cash offer. I mean, financing does not mean that you are not entitled to buying that home. And I had a buying experience in one of our commercial properties where, the gentleman that owned the property made the assumption that as a woman, I was not qualified to buy. And he took my offer. He shopped it all over town. Nobody else was going to bite on it because we were the best end users for that property. And he created so many hurdles for me to jump through because I was getting financing. And he's like, this really should be an all cash offer. And I said, it doesn't need to be. Financing wouldn't exist if it weren't appropriate. So we're a qualified buyer. We've transacted, dozens of times in this space. And he delayed the process by 4 months, in part because he said we wouldn't be able to close quickly enough. So he created all of these other hurdles along the way. So, and I'm a white buyer, right? And with resources and a whole company's worth of success stories to tell. And sometimes I can't get a buyer to acknowledge my value, or a seller to acknowledge my value as a buyer. And I can't imagine what it's like when you have additional hurdles.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting question. I mean, because we are, three, white presenting, people talking about fair housing and black and brown issues. But what do you see as the shortfalls in fair housing and in real estate right now? Is it just economic, or what are we doing wrong right now? And what are we doing? What can we do better? So
I mean, agents on the management side and on the sales side need to understand what fair housing actually is and what it's all about. They need to work with their both the buyers and the sellers to be sure that they understand what their rights are. There are a lot of workarounds I see in play all the time in the management space. In particular, I see management companies creating these sort of exclusive, almost pay to play memberships that you have to buy in order to see listings. That's just that's not even hiding the fact that you're trying to get around fair housing regulations and not wanting to accept voucher applicants. So we need to educate ourselves around what these programs are for, why they're important, why they're effective, and why everyone deserves dignified, quality housing, period, full stop. It's a human right. And that can work for everyone if everyone's working toward the same set of goals. And if it's not always just about the profit at the end of the day, doing the right thing will lead to greater profits. It may not in that transaction, but long term, it will lead to greater profits.
One thing that I am pretty passionate about is when you do create that housing, I think it's best placed in places where people can access the metro, where they can get to a grocery store. When we do these things where we put all of the affordable housing on one area of town, I don't think that does anybody any favors. So like the idea of this and birdSEED and like being able to get people into, wards 1 through whatever, and say, this is for everyone, and you can be in, you know, walking distance of a metro, and that's your right as well. Because if you can't get to public transportation or you can't get to work, you can't work to afford your house. So,
I mean, housing, education, healthcare, access to jobs are also inextricably linked. If you're taking people out of the environment where they're closest to the things that they need access to in order to have a healthy, fulfilling, successful life, then you're already starting 5 steps behind. And redlining and a history of systemic structural racism has created that dynamic very intentionally. That's the industry that the three of us are part of. And while we might say, oh, is it too much for 3 people who are white to be having this conversation? And I'd say it's absolutely imperative that we do. If we're uncomfortable with the topic, like that's a good thing, because we're talking about things that should make anyone feel uncomfortable, because it's just not right. The successes that this industry in particular have enjoyed at the expense of people of color, and their wellness, their access to housing, their access to jobs, their access to education have been significantly diminished, in part because there has been a push and a design to create segregation, and have white folks in flourishing suburban areas with all of the amenities, and moving African Americans and people of color to adjacent communities next to toxic waste dumps. That happened, and it still happens.
Yeah, this is a heavy stuff. No, it is. I mean, it's it's been a crazy year. I mean, let's take a step back for a second and realize, like, we've basically all been in our houses, unless we've been going out all the time, and then that means we probably haven't been responsible about the pandemic. But been in our houses, and literally this year was absolute insanity, right? For so many reasons. So this is very heavy stuff. If somebody doesn't feel kind of uncomfortable with it, or, awkward, then I think there's something wrong with, like that's, and the fact is, it's like, this is a reality we live in right now. So let's just like pony up and kind of do what we can right now.
Yeah.
I think, we've also seen a lot of people who, back in the spring and the summer were all up in arms about everything that was happening, and, going out and protesting and speaking out about all of the injustices that were very publicly happening. Right. But there's something different about what you're doing, Lisa. And I just want to I want to give you a kudos for that, because I mean, I don't know a lot of people personally who weren't semi or completely outraged by the stuff that was happening, but you're actually doing something with that. You're actually bringing something to fruition and actually enacting, hopefully, something that will have a ton of impact on lots and lots of people. And I'm just curious, do you have any opinions as why people don't actually bring it to the next step like you are? Like, I ask myself this stuff sometimes, like, why don't you do more or whatever? And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm such a fangirl of yours, because you don't just talk the talk, you walk the walk. Like, you're doing this big thing, and it's not like you don't have a family, you have a child, you've got lots of things going on. You've got your whole company that you're running. So you've got lots of stuff that's going on. But so yeah, do you have any opinions about why kind of that happens?
Sometimes I think people believe that, community work and focusing on a future that you're really invested in and want to be part of distracts from your core business. And I think it only strengthens the core business. So because it's fully baked into who we are and our identity as a family of companies, and for me as a person, this is just our work. It's not adjacent to, it's not an addition to, it's not on the side. It is fully, fundamentally built into our business model. that we intend to make a difference. And if we see that we can have an impact, I believe it's our moral obligation to act on that. And in particular, I think we wanted to focus on racial inequity and housing injustice and say, this isn't okay with us. I don't want to be part of an industry that's not doing something to right this wrong. And I wasn't seeing anyone else moving in that direction, which doesn't mean that there aren't people working on the same problem with their own programs and ideas. And we did this in part because, I appreciate and I'm fond of the competitive nature of our industry. I hope other people look at what we're doing and say, I should probably do that. That's probably a good move. I mean, listen, if they want to even look at it from a pure business perspective, most people these days, particularly millennials, they don't want to do business with a company that's not invested in making a difference. Full stop. I mean, that is where we're trending from a consumer perspective. People want to be aligned with companies that are doing the right thing. So I'm not giving a house away for every house I manage, right? Like the Bombas model or whatever. Right? But we can certainly say part of our profits are shared because the community supported us. We need to support the community. And that is a much more valuable marketing dollar to us than buying an ad in Prince of Petworth or buying an ad in the Washingtonian or the Post. We know that people will be inspired by us, again, walking that walk, putting our money where our mouth is, and saying that we want to be part of a significant change.
Yeah, I mean, I think that also speaks to like in this industry, there are these like tried and true methods of like being successful, right? You put your ads in the certain place and you say the certain things and you do the certain whatever. And I'm with you, man. I'm like not put the ads in the places kinds of thing. I mean, I'll do some of it if I have to, right? But like, but I would prefer that the things that I'm doing and the actions that I take to be attracting the people who are interested in that. So I very much appreciate that that's the model. I mean, yeah, if anybody looks at your website, but before birdSEED, you guys talk about this stuff through and through.
Yeah.
So it's not like this is some new thing. Like you were awoken in, last year and you're like, oh no. So for you, it's almost it's a natural foray into this, right? Because you're just continuing down that path of being socially conscious and, like I said in the beginning, a good person, frankly, but yeah, that's awesome.
I would also make the point that we're in a service-based business and a hard one at that, right? Probably one of the hardest, probably maybe second to restaurants. It's really hard for my team members to come in day in and day out and do their jobs and not get burned out and not feel frustrated and not feel sort of down about people getting frustrated with them or not meeting someone's very high expectations. Having this be so ingrained in what we do as a company, I think, is a really powerful offset to the hard days for our team members. They get a chance to engage in and participate in things that really make a difference to them personally, which I think is sort of like an offset to the parts that are hard. And I've enjoyed, I think, exceptional longevity among team members who have done those really hard jobs. With some, like, have been with me for 9 years. In fact, my first hire left to go get an MBA and then came back. And that's a huge win, not only for them, I think, because we're creating great jobs, but also because it's great for our company. Having turnover is really hard for the client. So this is an investment in everybody's success, and the client success, the resident success, my staff success, and the community being more successful. So it's really just a straight win all the way around.
Yeah, and to one of your points a minute ago, like being an empath in this industry can be really hard sometimes. Like I feel like I'm the ultimate empath, but it's just when you feel underappreciated, and you don't want to be like, I've done all these things for you, because that's not what you do in your job, but you feel that way and you feel like somebody doesn't get it. It can be tough. So I can see how having some underlying just thing that's, getting people through and helping them and focusing is pivotal for your staff.
I mean, our 2020 motto is really, when they go low, we fly high.
There we go with the bird stuff again.
Exactly. I mean, like I said, it never ends. But we can say the way we do this work, the way we engage with our community, you can be mad at me all day long, but I feel good about our work.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, we are going to come to a close here. I guess my last question for you is, I know you're really new. You just closed the door for people to apply for those $5,000 to $15,000 grants. So have you had any hiccups so far? Do you need any help with anything? Is there some kind of call to action Michael and I can do both now and for the next forever and ever? Amen.
It has been a really smooth, really time consuming, administratively tricky process. I'd say I wouldn't change a thing, but we're going to keep fine tuning the process. We got 42 applications the first round with just 1 month lead time. We're incredibly ecstatic about that. We'll be opening up another round of grants that will close the end of May. So May 31st, another round of grants will be given. What we'd like to do with the $215,000 is add zeros because the more we have, the more we can give. Right now, we've set it up with the community foundation so that we can accept tax deductible donations. Flock is donating 100% of our time, 100% of the media effort, 100% of the web work, 100% of the administrative costs that we incur with the foundation to host this program. And so if anybody's interested and motivated to contribute to this fund, it's 100% of that actually goes to someone who'll be buying a home. So, people are like, oh, I'm not sure I can give enough. $1 is something, anything will be helpful because what we do want to create is a sort of snowball in a good way, momentum where we keep adding more and more resources that we can make available because we know no matter what, no matter how much we have, the need will outpace the resources. And so the more we can aggregate, the better off we'll be and the more home buyers we can help with their purchase.
Well, la-di-da, Lisa, because I was about to end the episode by saying I'm going to donate $1,000 to birdSEED, so I'm going to be doing that.
That's awesome.
And I'm happy. I know, Michael, I'm sure you're also very happy to scream this from the rooftops and tell people what an amazing thing that you're doing.
It's a feather in your cap.
So it's oh my God.
The look of enjoyment that you guys did not see, but the look of enjoyment that she got when she figured that out was incredible.
Well, there you go, guys.
Man.
Lots of fun with
the gift that keeps on giving.
Well, listen, I'll make sure that I put links to donate in the podcast kind of notes or however my editor does that. I'm not really sure. How he works his magic, but it'll be in there. And so people can continue to donate and can do it, weekly, monthly, yearly, forever, if they want. And we'll hope that you guys get another 215 grand in like a couple days and go from there.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good one.
Thank you.